Hi everyone, please support our videos on Patreon. The link's at the end of the video and in the down there part. Thank you, you're lovely.
This show is comfy. The Ghost and Molly McGee is one of those shows. The kind of show that has just enough fantastical elements that cartoon fandom doesn't know what convenient pigeonhole to shove it into. When it was first previewed, there was a very minor storm in a teacup where people were guessing the show would go dark by the second season, only for one of the creators, Bob Roth, to actively refute that notion. I like this little tiny micro-controversy because it showed me that some people think the Owl House and Amphibia are dark. Y'all just don't pay attention to shit, do ya? We'll come back to this, but cartoon fandom has a hard time accepting that different shows exist. Anyway, The Ghost of Molly McGee is the latest in the animated sitcom genre. Modern cartoons can broadly fit into two camps. There's the action fantasy adventure dramedy of Steven Universe, Gravity Falls, She-Ra, and the Owl House, which generally has all the superficial elements to make fandom cream themselves and get all the coverage and accolades both deserved and not. And then there's the slice-of-life character-focused sitcom of The Loud House, Craig of the Creek, and the Casa Grandes, which are often lower stakes, set in the real world, feature minimal fantasy elements, if any, and are generally better overall. And The Ghost of Molly McGee is in the latter category. In fact, it takes somewhat from the slice-of-life comedy but with a gimmick style of Dexter's Lab, Fairly Odd Parents, or Jimmy Neutron of here's some minor fantasy or sci-fi elements that do nothing but add flavor to the sitcom. In this case, it's the titular ghost Scratch being bound to Molly and her house and a curse with the intent to scare her into leaving, only for Molly to latch onto him as a new best friend. And from there, Molly meets a girl named Libby and resolves to smother her in affection until the end of time. Molly is another variation of the high-energy Ray of Sunshine character. She's often compared to Mabel Pine, Star Butterfly, or Webby Vanderquack, but I don't think that works. Molly is an eternal optimist, but is otherwise grounded. Many of the characters she's compared to are more unhinged and creepy. She's more comparable to Luce Nocetta in that she wants people around her, she wants friends, and she will smother those people in love from the get-go. In fact, Molly's biggest flaw is that she goes too hard at times, such as an early episode when she hijacks Libby's bat mitzvah to make a big grand party because she felt Libby deserved all the pomp and ceremony possible, but Libby only wanted a small party with her family and Molly. This follows up in later episodes where she goes too hard in trying to mend rifts between people, often forcibly and against their will. And as far as character flaws go, loving people too much is an interesting one. With Luce, her showering her friends King, Ida, or Amity in love is never seen as a bad thing, and in one case was the catalyst to pull her girlfriend out of trauma-induced pessimism without even realizing it. It's treated as a universal positive, but Molly does go overboard at times, and I actually think that's kind of neat. I guess I find it interesting because it's a problem that I also have. I shower my close friends in love, casually say I love you, and have some level of romantic feelings for most of them, and I can go overboard with that at times, so I feel very seen by this character. Scratch, on the other hand, is an asshole. I mean, he's professionally obligated by the Ghost Council to scare people and make them miserable, so it makes sense that he's an asshole. He's greedy, lazy, self-absorbed, and at first despises Molly, but it's in that cartoon way where early on he doesn't want to admit he likes having friends, later on he warms up to her and becomes fixated on keeping Molly to himself, which brings him at odds with Libby, who also wants Molly all to herself. At the very least, they both really want to be on top of the pecking order. Can you imagine being loved this much? Scratch is interesting when he has to get taken down a peg, but I'd be lying if I said he was the character that carried the show. He's arguably the weakest of the three main characters, but that does take into account that the other two are just that strong. Speaking of which, there's Libby Stein-Torres. One of Molly's best friends, Libby is a social outcast with plenty of nerdy hobbies, especially about history and turtles. Libby and Molly vibe almost instantly and cherish their friendship to an almost comical degree. Libby makes Molly a friendship bracelet when asking if she wants to be her best friend, and Molly is the only person outside her family that Libby invites to her bat mitzvah. And Libby's family are the only ones she tells about Scratch because having to lie about Scratch threatens to throw a wrench into their friendship, and that is something Molly definitely does want to happen.
This has happened before. I just thought you were different.
I have to tell her!
That's a hard no!
I can't keep living this way, Scratch. Please?
Molly's friendships ultimately are the main plot. They're what the theme song focuses on, and the slice-of-life sitcom is ultimately about the relationship between people, which is why I adore her friendship with Libby. Molly's friendship with Libby is basically one where the two drown each other in love and affection on a near-constant basis. It's clear that they're both extremely important to one another and that they love each other very much. I mentioned before that Molly was the only one Libby invited to her bat mitzvah, but in that same episode, Molly hijacks it to give her the big party she sees on YouTube because she thinks Libby is so great that she deserves it. Extremely misguided, but still, aww. The reason it's misguided is because that's not what Libby wanted.
I didn't want a big party. I didn't want all these people. You've turned this party into what you thought I wanted.
Oh, so what was it that you wanted?
to spend time with you.
A later episode has Molly agonizing over the fact that she has to keep Scratch a secret and trying to figure out a way to keep Scratch happy and stay friends with Libby, even going as far as to invent an alter ego to do it, which fails miserably. This leads to Molly singing about how important Libby is to her.
But she's loving and she's thoughtful. I can't bear to see her go.
Aw, maybe it's best if I send her a text.
Scratch! Get away from that phone! I don't want to lose her. I don't want to hurt her.
If this girl gets any gayer, she's gonna spontaneously combust. Yeah, it's no surprise that people are shipping Molly and Libby en masse, and the closest thing to another ship is a few people latching onto Andrea, a character Molly has barely interacted with except for an early episode, where people thought they were gonna get another Amity, and let me tell you, they're even more irritating because they've even less ground to stand on. And you know me by now, I never say that a show has LGBT rep unless it's tangible and direct. And so far, everything about Molly and Libby's relationship just sets off the gaydar like crazy. But it's still possible for the writers to choose to keep them in a very loving and affectionate friendship, and honestly, I wouldn't mind that. As I said, I'm very affectionate myself, and I love my friends with reckless abandon, and I like feeling seen by that. But at the same time, there's no getting around the fact that their friendship is very gay. Like, intensely gay. Like, if they stay platonic, there's gonna be no denying there are some feelings in there. I like that vibe, and if they decide to keep it there, I'll be happy. I would like to see more shows acting like romantic feelings aren't the end of the world and won't ruin a friendship. I think it would be cool if one of them confessed to having feelings, got turned down, and everything was fine between them. At the same time, if you asked me to choose, I would pick making them a couple every single time. I think better gay rep is more important than the weird dynamics that I personally like, and I don't want this to come off like one of those homophobic weirdos who try to mask their hatred of gay relationships in hand-wringing about platonic friendships. If you're doing that, if you jump down in the comments to say, I would rather they stay platonic, why can't we have more platonic friendships in cartoon? Fuck off, we have plenty, go concern troll somewhere else. See, their friendship is so loving and so supportive and so intensely affectionate that trying to give either of them a love interest that isn't each other is going to be very difficult to justify, especially since the creators have said there are going to be LGBTA themes in the show. Admittedly, that statement isn't worth the paper it's printed on because it could mean something tangible, or it could mean the two dads trope again, or it could be a last episode hookup. We don't know if that statement is going to mean anything, and since The Ghost of Molly McGee isn't an adventure fantasy show with superficially dramatic storylines, it's not going to be getting articles talking about how revolutionary it is. I don't know if Molly and Libby are going to become romantic or stay platonic, but regardless of where they go, there is definitely no heterosexual explanation for this. Those girls are definitely gonna dress up and travel, that's all I'm saying. The entire show is very good at providing these kind of moments where everything is very soft and heartwarming. My favorite episode is the Festival of Lights, where Molly's family joins Libby's family to celebrate the last day of Hanukkah, only for the power to go out due to a storm. Thankfully, Libby's mother has a generator, but only a little bit of gas. She specifically says, about an hour, and then it immediately cuts to a menorah with one candle lit that says hour 1, and you immediately know where this is going. I think that's very cute. And then the whole episode is a series of vignettes where they do traditional Hanukkah celebrations and also things that are specific traditions for Libby's family, and the whole group bonds over food, games, and the whole thing is very cozy. The whole thing of friends and family coming together is the best version of a holiday story, and it's so comfy. Even when Libby talks about her family escaping the Holocaust of all things, it manages to maintain this warm, optimistic outlook, and you leave the episode feeling good, especially toward the end when the rest of the neighborhood joins the only place that has power to celebrate together, and so cozy and soft. I haven't gotten that vibe from a holiday episode of a cartoon since the Proud Family's Kwanzaa episode, which was also really good for a lot of the same reasons. You know what's funny? When I started writing this, I didn't have all of that on my mind. I just got into the groove and started talking about my favorite episode and everything I liked about it, stumbling on things I didn't even notice when I watched it. And now I adore that episode even more than I did like 5 minutes ago. The Ghost of Molly McGee only has 10 episodes at time of writing, so there's a limit of things to talk about, but so far it's a very silly show, but also very warm. Every time Molly goes on another crazy set of hijinks, there will inevitably be another sequence where she and Libby are just hanging out and giving each other the most adoring looks like the ones I give my wife whenever she's not looking, and you just feel good. This is a show that makes you feel good about life. Actually, funnily enough, despite the show being committed to a lighthearted tone, it does brush up against some heavy subject matter at times. Modern cartoon fandom interprets mature as being morose and angsty, addressing issues of trauma, but in a fetishistic way that gets praise from people who clearly aren't handling their shit very well. It's why I'm often dismissive of the crowd that pushes for animation to be appealing to adults, because it already did that decades ago and keeps doing it. It's just that you didn't watch those films or those shows. Pixar's been making melancholy and genuinely heartfelt films for years, but this crowd said it looked too kiddie and were too busy busting a nut over Kubo and the two strings. But this is a different beast entirely. The Ghost of Molly McGee touches on some extremely heavy subject matter, but neither takes those subjects lightly, nor do they mince words. I'll show you what I mean. This is a small example, but the Civil War has been a tangential subject in cartoons for a while. I remember an episode of The Weekenders that had lore studying for it, but when it's brought up, it's always in a very historically stripped down version, and I'm being vague to lead into,
Lincoln said that's not gonna work for me. I don't agree with the evils of slavery.
The Ghost of Molly McGee has an episode about Molly doing a report on Abraham Lincoln and actively addressing that slavery was the primary issue of the Civil War. That's not something children's shows typically do, especially not when merely pointing that out is more contentious now than it was 20 years ago. Another one, and this is a much more potent one, happens in the Festival of Lights when Libby mentions their menorah had been with their family through plenty of tough times. That's about as on the nose a euphemism as you can get, but they don't use it that way. They actually fade into Libby's great-grandparents escaping Germany during Kristallnacht. If you know the history, aka you are the parent watching this with your child, you know that they were one of the lucky ones because things are only going to get worse. That montage of them just like escaping and making a new life in the US is probably some of the heaviest and most genuinely moving storytelling to be put in a cartoon. I mean, it's grim, at the same time it's optimistic. Hang on, I need a minute. Okay, I'm good. No mincing words. This is beautiful and heartfelt, and God, I fucking love this episode. I guess the closest thing to a negative, and it isn't a small one, is that I really just don't care about Scratch at all. You could remove the ghost from the Ghost of Molly McGee, and the show would not be worse off for it. I had similar feelings about the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and that I was really invested in Sam's story, but honestly I skipped over any scene involving Bucky that didn't also involve Sam or Io. I actually jokingly call the show Falcon because of that. And yeah, Scratch is the Bucky Barnes of the show, less interesting than literally everyone else around him, and the fact that he's half of the main characters isn't great, but at the same time his presence also isn't enough to detract from the good parts of the show. Scratch is not enough to make Molly's big gay operatic number any less wonderful, nor make Festival of Lights any less cozy, welcoming, and emotionally moving. And if that's the biggest problem a show has, then fuck, you might be the best show ever made. I mean, seriously, this show about a silly girl and her ghost friend made me cry. What the fuck? The Ghost of Molly McGee is amazing. Please watch it. It is so good. 2021 was a shit year. Let's all have some good energy into 2022 by riding the good vibes.